G'day friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update for the 28th of August 2025. We're going to study the battlefield conditions and decide where things are going, because I think there is a slight change to the strategy that is slowly evolving. Remember, Russia's changed its strategy many times, sometimes going back to old strategies and then mixing it up. But the cauldron has been their most successful strategy so far, but they haven't always stuck to it. So before I continue, I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Elsebound, and Erotic Tales from the Empire. Part 1's out now. Thank you to all those who support the channel. I really appreciate the support, and you can support me on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. One of these days I'll get through a broadcast without a mistake, and people will flock to me and go, "Oh my God, it's a miracle." Alright, so the news has changed it up. Mostly garbage tier news, of course. There's nothing really... garbage tier, it has no consequence. It has no content. It has no... Most of it has no value. Most of it is more of the same. More of the same lies, more of the same composite photograph, or composite or touched up photographs. It's where we actually get a battle scene, and when we do, that's the cleanest trench I've ever seen in my life. And that's the cleanest burnt hand I've ever seen. You ever seen anybody burn their hand like that? That's a glove, but the glove is burnt and scarred, but not the tissue. It's like, wow. Because he's in shadows, but you ever seen anybody handle a mortar? All right, maybe they do handle a mortar without gloves, but that's a mortar operator without dirt on his hands? Wow. Look at that trench. But pristine. Even as the mortar goes off, that... Because, you're in a mortar trench like that, how long are you going to last on the front? There's no way. I've seen real mortar fights. You know what the Ukrainians really do with their mortars? They drop them off the back. They drop them off the back of a 4x4, usually and they pop a few rounds. Then they pick up the mortar and flee, because within seconds of them firing, the Russians are triangulating their position and preparing counter batteries. Most of the Ukrainians who are in trenches die. Okay, they go into trenches to hide from the Russian batteries and hope. And Ukraine has limited air defences, most of whom, lo and behold, don't defend the troops. But of course, they keep accusing Russia of attacking civilian infrastructure, the entire media, without proof, without evidence, without a single photograph, time after time. Alright, so there's a bit of horseplay going on. Starlink was allegedly cut off. Poland, the biggest donor to SpaceX satellite service for Ukraine. Apparently, it's a communication tool, resistance to Russian hacking and jamming. Okay. So, of course, they're looking how to share battlefield data with their allies. It's priceless. It's priceless, we say. We have data that's priceless for any country. In other words, they're out there selling your private information and collecting and farming information. Oh no. But of course, Russia has engaged in attacks. But again, Ukraine says they only kill civilians. They only attack civilian targets. And then they say, well, we're without power again. Well, not their media, of course, because they're in Poland. Not their president, because he's in Poland. And of course, he's always wanting to exert pressure on Russia to take real steps towards peace. Yeah, the real steps towards peace is knocking off Zelensky, who's constantly, every day, is making excuses for not... here we go. We're making the big V2, the victory missile. It is wonderful. So Germany's trying to attract more people into the armed forces because of growing fears about Russian aggression. Which you wouldn't have if it wasn't for your aggression in Ukraine. For NATO, after, 50 years, has finally met their first goal. And of course, Erdogan has, inaugurated Turkey's integrated air defense system, which I thought Turkey was bankrupt. Oh, wait, they're not really bankrupt. They're deliberately keeping their wages down and keep purposely withholding oil revenue to buy lots of weapons. But eventually they'll get caught out. Eventually Erdogan will be toppled by somebody within his own party, and they'll do so, and to stay in power they'll release all this untapped wealth which Turkey's been hoarding for close to a century, oil revenue, most of which they've probably spent anyway, so there's not that much to unlock. But Turkey, of course, isn't the only EU country in a panic, in a tailspin, destroyed by its massive spending on things that on unproductive expenditures. So there was a massive overnight missile attack, allegedly, that everything's destroyed, allegedly. Well, that's not destroyed. Look at that building in the background. That's still there. The hyperbole is literally destroying the country. Now, that's the kind of, two things men like. Big guns and big coconuts. So, short time ago, I swear, this map did not have a single marker on it. I was going to say, hey, what's up with it? But I guess I just had to give it an hour, I just had to give it time to breathe, But you can see there's an air launch up here in the north. Obviously, Kiev was the main target. They hit other areas. They took out power in this region yesterday. It's still without power. They took out several frontline areas with... apparently, there were allegedly explosions reported. Maybe that's because yesterday pointed out that Ukraine had failed in 2 weeks to successfully hit Crimea. Of course, this is all part of Zelensky's pressure. I want to bring the pressure onto Russia. Yeah, well, Russia responds and then you cry, right? So it's not pressure, it's cope and seethe. And that's a lot of coping and seething right now in a lot of people paying with their lives for Zelensky's arrogance. And we all know eventually the revolution will come for you too, Pierre. No, says Robespierre. They will never come for me. Ha 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 ha. But ironically, I think it was Napoleon who said it to Robespierre. All right, so we have some alterations on the front, not by much. Still fighting in Kupiansk, not much movement elsewhere. The thrust north and south here is continuing. The offensive towards Silvesk has intensified, and you can see they're going for an open format towards Lyman, where here they're still going for the Cauldron towards Silvesk. Here they're still going for the Cauldron, but they haven't expanded north here from Krominsky. They haven't, where in other areas they have expanded the Cauldron so far, but not much for here. It appears that Russia is slowly giving up on the Cauldron to maximize a 3-point attack. It's a standard 3-point attack, which can be, as you can see, either from a linear line or from 3 directions. 3-point attack, 3-point attack, 3-point attack, 3-point attack, you start to see the pattern, right? Russia's giving up on the Cauldron, but not entirely. They are still in places fighting with the Cauldron as they fight, but the stretching of their own front lines is getting to them there, which, if you may remember, the 1944 Operation Barbarossa, where Germans broke through Russian lines in several key places and kept extending and extending and extending, and they overextended, and in winter they couldn't keep up their supply lines. Russia, of course, is well aware, and should have been well aware, and so should Germany, that during the winter campaign against Napoleon, he had overstretched his supply lines, unable to secure them. Russia, of course, has a tactical advantage over Ukraine, but not much at the moment. And this is why you see him abandoning the Cauldron for a 3-point attack to wear down the Ukrainian forces and to present a stronger defense. Because the 3-point attack has less range for their long guns, so their long guns aren't as far back, so that Ukrainian has to be more forward. Okay, Ukraine can't say, we'll go for the edges. No, they can't, because the Russians can still bring enough guns to bear and move around. Whereas in the Cauldron, they can go up and down, but then when it comes to, there's an attack here, but you've got troops here, they can't just go straight line, they have to go around. Whereas if this was a straight line, an attack here, they could just go across and across. So they're going for a 3-point attack where you can spread your troops out, but when there's an offensive, you can concentrate them, and then when heavy artillery comes, you can retreat and spread out again. Counter batteries and counter batteries, troop movements, they all matter. No one single strategy is ever popular or important for long. We saw Ukraine try the Roman tactic and said, this worked with Alexander, this worked with the Romans. Yeah, but it failed because as soon as you can spread your troops out in a long line and march forward, but machine gunners, these tactics, human waves, just whatever you call them, the only tactic from war that is certain with Napoleon all the way back to Alexander is cavalry, and replace cavalry with tanks. You have troops backed by artillery, right, going all the way back to catapults, the Romans. Yeah, but they spread their catapults over a linear 3-point attack. It was Zelensky tried to use the we'll advance, but we'll just put more distance between the troops. Yeah, that was the Romans' response to archers and using armour as shields, right? And as the modern version of shields. But the thing is, the Russians aren't armed with bows and arrows, they're armed with RPGs and have been systematically destroying Ukrainian armoured vehicles around 10 to 20 a day. That's a small amount of men, each vehicle per day, that are dying outside of combat. So they're not counted straight away. They're combat losses. And Ukraine is caught many times, including called out by Trump, for lying about their combat losses. So the Russian tactics are slightly changing. Now, we can't say with certainty we're coming onto a troop rotation. We haven't seen any announcements. But what we have an announcement from the Kremlin saying that there's a meeting that is being prepared, but it must be well prepared. And they haven't set a date, but they're waiting on Zelensky to respond. Again, Zelensky is the obstacle, not the victim. He's the perpetrator. And speaking of perpetrators, France and Germany are now officially in financial difficulty. They're relying on basically, they're looking to cut services. They're risking default. France in particular is in recession. Their austerity measures are already unpopular and they're going for now a huge cut to their pensions. Macron, of course, greedy. He made too many loans to Africa, and then I think Maloney called him out where France was collecting their debts in gold, and France was setting the exchange rate instead of an open market. And many countries have accused France of bleeding them of gold, and particularly, France has the largest gold reserve without mines. Which in itself is not an accusation. You have to go deeper into it. I'm sick and tired of the left and their flat-out accusations. It is far more complex than that. And African countries are equally to blame because they're also stealing from their own people resources. They're also allowing China to steal resources. And a lot of these third-party debts, huge brokerage fees. So France isn't the only one to blame for this, but France shouldn't be loaning out money, particularly to people who can't pay or won't pay, and then acquiring those bullion reserves, which just sit there in the vault and do nothing, okay? Now they have to sell them off, and the gold ain't going to bring that much of a return. In fact, the costs... A lot of people are saying, they're not accounting for the cost of the bullion. And that's true. How much of this bullion cost is actually a loss? Yes, you've got to pay us a loan, but then we add in the cost of the loan, the cost of recovery. No, that's not how it works. So the countries default on their loans. France has to write them off, and just gets endlessly complicated because a lot of the time they're counting on the future value of the gold, and it's ridiculous because you've got to sell it at some point. Otherwise, it's worthless in a vault. Okay, this is what got France into problems in the first place with vaulting. You go back to the collapse of the French economy before Napoleon and Louis. First, they collapsed the economy by hoarding all the gold, right, which stopped the flow of current trade. And then they overextended the economy by giving everybody gold and just increasing the debt until everybody was in debt and nobody was paying their debts. because everybody was in debt. How do you get to the point where everybody's in debt and not paying their debts? Well, actually, it took place over the course of borrowing, right? Borrowing lots of money, right? And then spreading your debts over multiple businesses over time. And then, of course, the farmers borrowing money, but to selling the food at a loss because they weren't farming, they were borrowing money against the value of the land, and the value of the land fallow, for some stupid reason, was worth more than productive land, because horses instead of food. But the horses needed food. And we're seeing it again, right? We're seeing it again. The unproductive. People borrowing money and not making goods to buy, and people having no money to buy, people buying up expensive luxury items, like $40,000 on a handbag. Yes, a lot of this money is going on a lot of billions have been spent every year on drugs and prostitutes, and none of that money is taxed. It just disappears out of the economy into the dark economy that is the Middle East. Okay, you've got to have a dark economy somewhere. You've got to have for money to leave the economy, it's got to go somewhere, right? And not be spent and not be taxed. It's like all this gambling and this fool's paradise. It's fine to have gambling as long as it's taxed. So you don't, but all this money going through tax havens and disappearing, never to be taxed. France is doing the same mistakes over and over again, trying to please the rich and trying to buy the poor. Eventually you run out of the middle class's money. Now, Hungary, of course, has retaliated for the attack on the pipeline by saying they're going to ban Ukraine's entry into the EU. And so Kiev retaliates, because this is what children do, okay? Ukraine always has to be in the right. Or Ukraine always has to beat their chest and say, I'm the bigger dick, I'm the man, you will obey me, I'm a Zelensky. And the rest of the world doesn't say, shut the fuck up, to this little pipsqueak. Because he could just go, boo-hoo, my country got invaded. Yeah, get in line, slob. Get in line, slob, Zelensky. Of course, he's killing his country. Now, the average troop age has hit 44, according to Victor Taran, a highly respected geopolitical commentator. Now, the troop age, of course, I don't know exactly where they get their information, but the Ukrainian media, hasn't called him out, hasn't proved him wrong. Okay, so the average troop age, you can see it. We have propaganda videos, though. Some showing, we don't have it the other day. Yeah. Look at this, clean. It's amazingly clean. We had one the other day where there was women on the front line, with their, they sport the black bars under the eyes and putting on their best war face. Sure, love, we believe you. You don't look like you can lift that 6.8 kilogram battle rifle, let alone carry the 55 kilogram pack of ammo. And I don't think you would like... I see you at the front line going, so who wants to touch my boobies and give me their fruit rations, I can't eat this. They're going through the MRE, they're opening a can of Bosch. I don't see them eating Bosch, these Ukrainian women in makeup, they're carrying it's all propaganda. But of course, a lot of people know there was a blow-up at the White House a couple of months ago. This is why it's been brought up again, is because somebody in an interview, somebody at USA Today decided to bring it up and try to embarrass JD Vance, and he said, "No, I think it was useful. I think the American people need to see this." And of course, he repeated his call for Zelensky that he should behave and that they need to move towards a settlement to stop the killing. Zelensky, of course, has been granted a little bit of leeway and some access to US financing, but not government financing. Europe is underwriting the financing. And, of course, this is all a distraction from the fact that the people behind the war, maybe Soros will get prosecuted, but I doubt that most of the people behind the Ukraine war will be prosecuted. But one of the people behind this war is Deputy Prime Minister Olga Stefanishyna, who has been called out as a little mustache man who was involved in very complex and possibly illegal deals in which her husband has allegedly absconded with assets with her help, which is weird. You don't normally help your ex-husband run away from you and transfer assets to them. Women tend to be the other way around. They tend to abscond with assets and take them with them. So the fact that her husband has disappeared with assets may suggest that he disappeared permanently and just the name has been used. Although it's apparently he won some sort of court case and contact is limited for both of them to their children, although this says here that contact was limited to matters concerning their children, that she has no connection to her ex-husband, which is not true. After the divorce, apparently there were asset transfers. There's been multiple accusations of money laundering, and also she appeared for the Democrats to make some timely statements that were called out later by Speaker Johnson. This case is bizarre, to say the least, but she's been forced to step down as Deputy Prime Minister, and of course she's been rewarded as a loyal party member. The party is always right, comrades! And so she's replacing the US ambassador, who allegedly got thrown under the bus because of the debacle, which is why this came up. But of course, Europe has made a final definitive statement on the Duper oil pipeline, until tomorrow morning, of course, when Zelensky tries to attack it again, and then they'll be talking about whether or not it's a legitimate military target or not. But according to Europe tonight, the pipeline in Russia should not be targeted. But of course, this is, the third time they've said it, and the third time that Zelensky's, and tomorrow will be the third time that Zelensky has ignored the fact that if he wants Russia to stop attacking Ukrainian infrastructure, he has to stop attacking infrastructure. Remember, Trump asked for a ceasefire and asked them both to stop attacking infrastructure. And Zelensky goes him first and then fires a whole bunch of rockets and drones at Russian infrastructure and says, Putin retaliated. Putin attacked us, I know people will say this is, but Germany, everybody seems to point to World War II and say, it's ridiculous that Poland attacked Germany. Well, wait a minute. Poland had more soldiers than Germany in 1939. Poland didn't have tanks, but they had more artillery. They didn't have as many aircraft. And also, they thought they had Russia at their back. Of course, that was a lie. Warsaw was besieged by Russia. Russia wasn't coming to their aid, Russia was coming to invade. And a lot of people in Poland thought Germany was coming to their aid because of the invasion by Russia. See how it works, folks? The lies, the propaganda, the altering of history. How many of people out there know that in 1939 Germany and Russia invaded Poland, and that half the country thought the other half thought the one was coming to their aid, not realising that they were so bitterly divided by politics, they didn't realise that they were both getting played by the central bankers who after World War II went from Switzerland to the United States, although some did stay in Switzerland because they got immunity for their actions. I forget the name of the operation, but I know it was related to Operation Sunrise. I know that some bankers out of Italy were protected. I know a lot of people fled Eastern Europe. This is all about the childish game of politics where people deliberately lie, create problems, and rely on their followers to support the lie. Until people and of course the left will gaslight you and say, the Republicans are in a cult. We're just holding you to account. Every accusation is a confession. So every time Zelensky opens his mouth about Putin, it's a confession. Every time the Ukrainian opposition speaks, the Western media ignores them. Yet time and time again, the Ukrainian opposition has been very consistent that Zelensky and his cohorts are crooks, leading Ukraine to its destruction. And you have to look at this like the situation in the breakup of Yugoslavia. That a large number of people didn't want to be in either ruled by Croatia or Serbia. That a large group of invaders wanted their own country, and the West decided that breaking up Eastern Europe and creating mayhem, well, it worked, unfortunately, destroyed the cohesion between Eastern Europe and Russia because Russia was unable to provide security. Of course, Clinton is responsible for the deaths of millions, not just during his term, but those now and in the future who'll die because of the destabilisation of Europe by Bill Clinton. And the ongoing economic destabilisation. Now, Turkey has economically shot itself in the foot, of course, with its greed over oil revenue and the falling profits. Because remember, folks, profits are high at the start when you build an oil plant cheap. But as the time goes on, the plants wear out very quickly. That much heat, that much pressure. Pipelines don't last. They say, this pipeline will last 20 years, and they find out it only lasts 2. Because it was made cheaply and under budget and came from China, and instead of getting their money back, Uruguay, it was Ecuador, one of the first countries in the world to actually get their money back from China. It's like, wow. But of course, the China and India are responsible for this war just as much as Zelensky and just as much as the WEF hiding out in Switzerland. I think one of these days there's going to be a nuclear accident and there's going to be suddenly a black hole, a big depression in the middle of Europe, and everybody's just going to go, Lake Switzerland, let's fill it up and never speak of it again. Because frankly, people are sick of the Swiss. People are sick of the foreign interference from people hiding in Switzerland. But Switzerland's like Israel. It's a convenient target on the map. But the people who are responsible will just switch. Before the missile, Iran will launch a missile. within 5 minutes, every guilty person will be on their private jet out and leave the people behind to suffer the consequences of their actions, not the actions of the criminals. Always get, and this is the problem with politics. Okay, politics make strange bedfellows. Intelligence services and governments always align with the most crooked, not with the most honest. They're all, until we change tactics, we're going to continue with these worldwide problems. And even as Elon Musk says, we should be working towards the stars and going our separate ways. Instead, there's too many people wanting to fight over the dirt beneath their feet, and have been for the last 6,500 odd years, since most, because that's about the time that other nations became aware of other nations. Until other nations became aware of each other, most of them lived quite peacefully. Look at the Inca, look at Toltecs. As soon as they discovered the Olmecs, they wiped them out. And then the Aztecs come out and wiped out most of them. And then the Mayans wiped out most of the people around them. You think the white man's the problem. You just don't know world history, folks. You just don't know world history. Ukraine is a big hate boner for Russia, but most of them are ethnic Russians, 70%. Most of them, of course, have moved into the Russian side, but most of the Slavs, who made up the bulk of the population in Western Ukraine, most of the Slavic population in Western Ukraine is gone, leaving behind the various self-identified, which is, Ukrainian is a dialect. It is not a language, it's a dialect. There's a subtle difference. And eventually, of course, as you can see, Hungary and others, everybody's wanted a pipeline through Ukraine. Everybody's wanted a rail line through Ukraine. And of course, this is all about Zelensky wanting his share of the Belt and Road, and the people in eastern Ukraine didn't want it. They didn't want anything to do. They were sick and tired of Kiev taking their tax money, and they declared independence. If they were Muslims, you would be guaranteed the US Army would have come to their rescue under Biden. That's the problem, isn't it? Politics, racism, belligerence. You've got to get rid of this mindset of politics, because politics has no morality. Just like atheism has no morality. When you base your morals on getting your way, that's not morality. That's narcissism. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support the channel on Patreon. Or buy my books or buy my merch. Most of you opt for my books. Thank you very much, Lee. Scan the QR code on the screen. It brings you to my link tree, which you can also find in the description below or in my profile. Thank you very much. See you in the next video, and bye for now.